Thank you, Amanda. So, welcome everybody to Your Sustainable Home Now. I'm Jerry Frankel, and with Doug Sharp, we're both members of the Comprehensive Sustainability and Energy Committee. We're pleased to be here today and to present to you this little workshop on making your home sustainable. Next slide. So our presentation and workshop tonight is the fifth event in a series of events that we're calling the Cooler Concord Sustainability Series. We've had 4 prior to this with great success, and we still have one more coming up on June 4th. That will be the EV display and charging tips open house. And at that event, there'll be a number of new model EVs there for you to check out. You can talk with their owners. There'll be EV experts there to answer questions about, particularly around charging and taking long trips and what kind of hardware you need. So be sure and check that out. But for tonight, we're going to talk about sustainability. Next slide, please. So during tonight's workshop, we'll begin with some polls so that we get an idea of who's in the audience here and what your interests are. Then we'll dive into the presentation material we have. There'll be opportunities for question and answer and discussions. So we hope we have a dialogue here tonight. The major topics for tonight we'll begin by describing Concord's sustainability goals, and then get into the meat of it with sustainability inside your home, and then what you can do for sustainability outside your home. And we'll also point out that there are a large number of rebates available for different items, and we'll provide you with links to get more information on each of those. Next. So we're going to begin with a poll here where we'd like each of you to tell us a little bit about yourself, particularly in regards to sustainability and what you've already done. So if you would, please check off all that apply in this poll and then submit it when you're done. I'm doing that myself right now. And in a moment, once all the responses are in, we'll display the results and we can see collectively what we've all done so far.
I'll just give a 5-second warning. We don't have quite full participation. So just seeing if any last minute entries come in. All right, I think we'll just end there.
Okay. Well, we have some very interesting results here. The first thing I noticed, and this everyone should be congratulated on this, that everyone has replaced their light bulbs with LEDs. Every respondent said yes to that. That's great. That's a smart and easy thing to do, and it's a great place to start. Half of the folks here have an EV. It's another great start. And again, half have completed a home energy audit, and half as well have a sustainable plan for replacing their heating system. So this is telling me that we have a very good crowd here, folks who are not only very interested, but everyone, it appears, has already taken some action. Several of you have already taken multiple actions. Hopefully today, as we go through these slides, you'll find other opportunities to take action, this is what this is all about anyway. Okay, next slide, please. So sustainability has popped up recently as a big topic, a huge topic. And I think it's fair to ask the question of why now? And the short answer for this, I found in a Reuters headline a few weeks ago, where they said, and this is the exact headline, it's now or never. If we can't manage to make severe emissions cuts quickly, we won't be able to avoid the climate extremes. So this is why we're here, really, to help accelerate our collective efforts here in Concord to cut our emissions significantly. Next slide. So I thought we'd start with a description or short description of Concord's sustainability goals. We have some explicit goals that you may or may not be aware of. In 2019, at town meeting, Article 51 passed, and it committed us as a town to several goals. The two sort of top level or biggest ones, if you will, are cleaning up the electric supply. And the goal there is to have 100% carbon-free electricity here in Concord by 2030. I'm happy to say CMLP has made great progress to that already. Last year, 83% of the energy provided by CMLP was emissions-free. And so they're well on track to meet this goal. The other very high-level goal is to cut our overall greenhouse gas emissions from 2008 levels by 80% by 2050. And we've got good progress so far as well here. Not as dramatic as with CMLP, but good progress nonetheless. We've had a 22% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions as measured by results in 2019. But the town has gone beyond that in terms of details. We have a climate action and resilience plan created in 2020 that outlines 5 goals for us to achieve in our quest to cut our emissions significantly. I'll just go through these very briefly. The first one is to minimize greenhouse gas emissions from our buildings and solid waste systems. So this is differentiated from, for example, reducing emissions from transportation. The second one, which I mentioned earlier, is to get our electricity supply to be 100% non-emitting, carbon-free. The third one is to ensure that everyone in Concord has access to zero carbon transportation systems or options. We all have to move around to one degree or another, and this is an effort to, or a goal targeted at reducing the emissions during our transportation. Number 4 is to enhance our natural resources to maximize biodiversity and carbon sequestration. You know, it's not just about cleaning up the air. It's not just about cleaning up the electricity. It's also about maximizing our natural system. And to do this, as goal number 5, we need to design our critical infrastructure here in Concord to reduce emissions and prepare for projected climate impacts. So we have multiple goals. They're each coming at this from a different perspective. And so the actions that one can take that we'll go through here in just a moment, they all target slightly different versions of these goals. But the idea is, as a town, as a community, we have goals and we all need to do our part to achieve those goals. And by your being here tonight, it's clear you want to do your part, and we're happy to help. Next slide. So here's a slightly more detailed view of how we're doing so far. The green reflects results in 2008, the blue from 2016, and the yellow from 2019. And you can see that there's been substantial reduction in emissions from buildings and from transportation over the years, the last 14 years since 2008. We can also see, unfortunately, that our emissions from waste are increasing. And granted, this is not as big a piece or as large an amount as from buildings or transportation, But again, we're all trying to do everything we can from different perspectives. And so some of our actions will target waste reduction. Next slide. So the last slide was looking backwards, looking at 2008 and 2016 and 2019. This slide is looking forward. And what it shows are 3 different pathways towards carbon emissions reduction that depend on our actions. So the top one in sort of a dark red is labeled as business as usual. And so this is what we expect will happen if we don't do anything differently than we're currently doing. The middle line, the blue line, reflects a 1% actual annual reduction rate. And so this assumes that we'll reduce our emissions by 1% each year. And that would, you can see where that gets. It's substantial, but it doesn't hit the target, which is shown in green. And so we need to do more than just the 1%. In short, we need to do as much as we can right now. Next slide, please. So tonight we're going to talk about how to make our homes more sustainable. And there's a number of things that one can do. Some of them are annotated on this slide. In subsequent slides, we'll go into these in more detail. But just to kind of put this in perspective, you know, some of these apply to inside your home. Some of them apply to outside your home. Some of them occur, such as water conservation, in both places. But this is what we're going to focus on tonight, and we'll go into this in detail. And at this point, Doug Sharp will take over and present our portion on sustainability inside our homes.
Hello, everybody. Sorry about that little distraction. We're going to, I am working on the CSEC committee along with Jerry, and we're going to be doing this second poll as an effort to try and identify of the inside methods of creating a better sustainable home, which are of the highest priority and which are the lowest priority. So please go ahead and try and fill out this poll and identify, starting with number 1 as the greatest priority, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, going down to identify the additional properties. And this will give us a good idea of what priorities you all are interested in looking at tonight, and we'll try and identify the ones that are of the highest priority that way.
Okay, well, I'm Barbara. I cannot figure out how to raise my hand, nor can I figure out how to do the poll. I see it in front of me, but there's no way for me to add my input to this screen.
So,
Barbara, if you hover along the edge of the screen, do you see 2 arrows pointing left and right?
No.
Okay. Well, we're glad that you chimed up and let us know. Do you feel comfortable telling us which one of these is your highest priority instead of
Right now?
filling out the poll? Yeah, and the reason we're asking is we'll spend a little bit more time based on what people's interests are tonight.
Okay, but I don't understand why. I mean, I can't raise my hand either.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that that's happening.
Okay, anyway, so you want me to just tell you?
If you're open to that, we'd love to hear
Yeah,
from you.
okay.
But you don't have to if
No.
we don't want to put pressure on you if
No,
you
no,
don't
no,
want
no,
to
I'd
chime.
like to participate. I mean, does anybody else have that problem?
It could be that the version of the Zoom client that you're using is below a certain threshold. And if
Oh.
that is the case, that could cause a problem, we believe.
Imagine that, something on my computer is out of date. Okay, so maybe the home energy assessment, update that. That would be one.
Okay.
And two could be weatherizing. And three could be recycling. And four, well, I already have energy efficient appliances and I don't have AC. And so, I'm not, it doesn't really matter. We'll say, hey, heating can be 4 and energy appliances can be 5. How's that?
That's perfect. Now, can you see the rank orders results that are showing up from the poll of this on the screen that you can see?
Me personally? No.
No, other people too. Everybody should be able to see the rank order poll results. And when you look at home energy assessments, 11% thought it was the highest priority, 33% thought it was the second priority. 11% thought it was the third priority, and 22% of you thought it was fourth priority, and 11%. So we're pretty evenly distributed, but
Doug, what sticks out to me is that 50% of people, most people, thought that heating, cooling, and ventilating the home was the top priority. So that's kind of interesting. And
Right.
then I would say maybe like Barbara, everybody's got energy efficiency appliances. So a lot of people ranked that kind of lower on the scale, a 5, maybe even a 3, neutral area. And then other one that we see a lot of interest in, probably a tie really between weatherization and recycling and reduce, which weatherizing kind of comes along with the heating and cooling aspect. So I think those are the trends that I see. So maybe if we spend a little bit of time even thinking through what are our steps of doing the home energy assessment, then weatherizing the home, heating and cooling, and maybe we can kind of walk through all of those.
that sounds good. So why don't we move on, having taken this poll? The first area that we want to talk about that has to do with sustainability inside your home has to do with getting a home energy assessment and identifying energy waste that you might have in the house. This is going to reveal a number of aspects of the house, from ranging from leaky windows to poor insulation problems and things that have to do with making the house tighter. And it will also have an impact on whether or not certain new furnaces or heating sources or cooling sources in the house get recommended. You can get a free home assessment from the Concord CMLP group that are running the power utility and electric plant for Concord. If you go to this URL, and they will help identify sources of waste in the house. They'll examine your home's heating system, lighting, and weatherization needs. And assessments can be conducted remotely, partly if you need to, and you can't have them visit right away, or there are some details, they can follow up with you remotely. probably one of the most important things for consideration in your HVAC system, your heating or cooling system in your home, depends on how well weatherized your home actually is. If you get a free home energy audit, they will probably recommend, first of all, to do these weatherization steps from air sealing and fixing air leaks, because it's one of the most effective ways of improving your energy efficiency. And it makes a lot of sense to do this before changing out a heating system, so that the efficiency of the heating system is going to be directly related to the kind of weatherization and the R values of the ceiling and the wall that your home has, and the tightness of the home. Again, there are a lot of good rebates for weatherization, and we urge you to seek them out through the Concord website. Let's talk for a minute about different kinds of heating and cooling and ventilation systems in your home.
Doug, this is Kim. Can I add just a couple of
Yeah.
points?
Please.
Yeah, so back to the weatherization. Concord offers 50% of your weatherization costs they will reimburse, which is pretty significant, up to $1,000 per 12-month period. So that's a pretty significant reason to go and explore getting weatherization. The town is interested in making sure that people have well insulated and tight homes.
Thank you. So let's talk for a minute about heating and cooling and ventilation systems in your home. The traditional heating and cooling systems were furnaces and natural gas boilers. And even many homes in Concord still are using those types of heating sources, and some of them use a resistance heating. But the newer all-electric focus has to do with using heat pumps. And what this picture depicts is the different kinds of heat pumps, and we'll talk a little bit about that. There are mini split ductless heat pumps, air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and they work in different configurations that houses are set up as. What are heat pumps? Essentially, a heat pump is a bidirectional air conditioner that cools the air in your home when it's hot outside, or heats the air in your home when it's cold outside. They work in both directions. One for the winter time when you need heat, and another way in the summertime when you need cooling. And they essentially pump heat back and forth from the outside into the inside of the house. There are different kinds of heat pumps, and a common configuration, probably the most common one, because a lot of houses have resistance heating, hot water hot water pipes that are in the house that distribute the heat through radiator systems in the house. Those heating systems those houses don't have any ductwork in the house, so that there's no way to distribute the heat flow except using these indoor distribution units. And that's what a ductless mini split system is referred to as, if you've ever heard of that. It requires the use of an outdoor compressor unit, which you see at the bottom on the left, and an indoor distribution unit blower that gets mounted on some of the principal rooms of a house. And in some cases, it will serve for one room, And in some cases, it'll serve for multiple rooms if there's adequate airflow through the house. In more formally designed homes, where there's a traditional ducted heat system that uses an oil furnace or a natural gas boiler system, those homes typically have an air exchanger in the basement that is connected to the outside unit that you see in this picture, which is a condenser unit that helps to cool a unit that is in the air handler or create heat in that air exchanger in the air exchanger itself. Let's keep going. To make another distinction about different kinds of heat pumps, there's ground source heat pumps and there's air source heat pumps. And probably the air source heat pumps are the most well known in terms of the quantities that you see being put in, but the ground source heat pumps are very efficient and they tend to be a little bit more expensive, but the difference between an air source heat pump and a ground source heat pump is the outdoor unit and condenser and the heat portion of the exchange, it comes from the ground, and the average temperature of the groundwater through the year is typically around 50 degrees and not so cold as the cold air that you see being used in an air source heat pump, where in the wintertime, when it gets very cold outside and the air temperature is in the range of less than 15 degrees, getting down to 10 degrees or even below zero, the efficiency of the outdoor unit has to be a lot higher. And right now, today, only in the last 10 years or so have the air source heat pumps been improved to the point where they can operate fairly well in very, very cold temperatures that you find in this region of New England. So many of the new air source heat pumps, the best ones, are rated at being able to still provide heat in a house down to 5 degrees or even a lot less than that. Maybe Kim, you have a comment on that.
Yeah, they heat pumps nowadays, you can use them down to minus 15 degrees. I'll make a couple of points here, if you don't mind, Doug.
Yeah.
One is the costs of running a heat pump are probably half of what you would pay if you have oil, propane, and even more than half if you have electric resistance. So if you, and generally oil and gas furnaces are rated about 15 to 25 years in lifespan. So if your furnace or your heating unit is getting near that time, then you have one appliance that can both heat and cool, as Doug said. So that actually saves you money. You don't have to go out and buy a separate appliance to do heating, and then another appliance to do the cooling, which would cost you a significant amount of money. Do you want me to tell you a little bit about rebates?
Not yet. Well, we'll get to that because at the end of the program, we have a whole section on rebates.
Great.
Another type of appliance that has to do with the heating and cooling of your house has to do with the water heater. Most people have a water heater that's associated with their furnace, but now it's possible to get a heat pump water heater that will remove you from having to be, your hot water needs will be all provided with a emission-free heat pump source. And they work very well now. They save money because they're using a heat pump, and They reduce your carbon footprint because there's no carbon emissions when they're powered that way. An element of them too is that they will dehumidify your basement typically because they're sucking heat out of the basement area where the unit is typically installed and providing conditioned air in that area too. A lot of people have been resistant to implementing a heat pump water heater because they're sort of new. And a lot of people feel that maybe it would take longer to heat the water, but from the experiences that I've had with people that have them in the town of Concord and some of the CSEC people that have them, they have found no complaints and found them to be very useful appliances. If you look at the rebates, okay, I guess here, we have a slide, Kim, so why don't you speak to this if you want?
Oh, all right. Well, so there's some very generous rebates. The state, in order to achieve its 2030 goal of cutting emissions in half, has kind of increased the incentives, and particularly for heat pumps. So Concord has decided to meet the efforts that Mass Save, which is the state agency that offers the rebates. So if you have a gas appliance, you would go through Mass Save, and you would get the same amount of rebates as you would if you had oil or propane or electric resistance in the town. So all these amounts are the same. I will add one thing is the state is offering an additional rebate of alternative energy credits for heat pumps that are what they call a very cold climate. And those ones that can go down to like -5 or 10 degrees. If you have that and you're heating your entire house with heat pumps, then you are also eligible for alternative energy credits, which add another $1,000 or $2,000 depending on the size of your home.
So just to reflect with this slide, one of the things that we're saying here is these numbers here that are shown are roughly correct for the rebate sections. It doesn't speak to the overall cost of the overall system, but many of the ground source heat pumps cost a little bit more because they have to drill wells to get to the ground source areas where they pump the water through those wells. So that's why the rebates are a little bit higher for the ground source heat pumps than the air source heat pumps. If there are any questions later on, when we get to the question and answer section about any of these ground source or air source heat pump options or the heat pump water heater, please ask them. Another appliance or unit that is needed to create a more sustainable home, especially in newer homes, has to do with these things called HRVs or heat recovery ventilator systems. There is also sometimes these are referred to as ERVs for energy recovery ventilator systems. But in a tight house, which a lot of the newer houses have to be that have been built in the last 5 or 10 years, or even some of them older than that are tight, it makes sense to have an air exchange unit that will refresh and take the stale exhaust air out of the house and refresh it with clean and new intake air. But it helps to keep air fresh in a tight house. The next section that we want to touch on that has to do with sustainability inside your house are the appliances that you use. And energy efficient appliances are very important for consideration. And we'll go into a little more detail about that. Most of the appliances that are out in the market right now are promoted through, if they're energy efficient, they come with an Energy Star rating. And that means the companies have done research to make them as efficient as possible, or at least give information about how efficient they are. They come with an energy guide sticker on them generally to indicate the estimated yearly operating costs of them and the amount of energy that they will use. And these products are in the categories of washers and dryers, dishwashers, refrigerators and freezers, humidifiers or dehumidifiers, a lot of different kinds of office equipment, and TVs and media players. Look for the Energy Star guide when you're buying a new appliance, and it'll make a difference. Another area that we're advocating for in the sustainable home now is considering or reconsidering the cooking environment that you're working in, to work with something that's not based on fossil fuel and not that provides advantages that gas does not provide. Gas heat cooking puts a lot of particulate and pollutants into the air inside a house, and the air quality inside a house is not as good. So the idea of using an electric range or an electric induction cooking stove has a lot of benefits that we'd want you to consider to make your house more sustainable. And one of the things about these new induction cooktops that is a benefit is that they reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and they also do not, the potential for having a fire from leaving on a valve and letting the fire continue to burn is impossible on one of these induction cooking ranges, because as soon as you take the pot off of it, the induction stops and the heating elements stop operating. Anyway, many people find they prefer these new induction cooktops, and we'd have you consider those. Another area that's significant that has to do with indoor sustainability is the lighting that's used in the house. From the poll, we could see that most of you have considered this and have taken steps. I think that the steps along these lines that have to do with LED bulbs are a few years older, maybe 10 or 15 years now, and they've been popularized as easy ways to save energy. If you haven't considered this, though, we advocate that you use this as an important step to reaching a sustainable home, making your home more sustainable. One of the things that's true about this is that lighting energy consumption with an LED is about 75% more efficient than it would be. And it typically, like a 150 watt bulb that's an incandescent bulb can be replaced with a bulb that uses probably 10 or 20 watts to provide the same amount of light. And these new LEDs that are out are well color balanced. It used to be that you could only get certain color spectrum lights, but now it's quite easy to get the bulbs in different lumen ratings that allow you to have whatever color you need in your house. Another area that is significant that we want to emphasize that has to do with inside of your house sustainability is the waste flow. And we're advocating reduce, reuse, and recycling. And this has to do with the way that the recycling gets done in your house. Our culture is very consumable focused, and too often there's too much waste that gets recycled when something simply breaks down. We're trying to re-educate and refocus people on using things in a more reusable way. One thing that happens in Concord that's important to know about if you don't know is they have an annual or biannual swap off and drop off, which is a program where people can take their waste items to the DPW, the Department of Public Works area in Concord, and drop them off. And there are waste streams of different kinds that are taken and recycled and reprocessed and give people in Concord a way to reduce and reuse better. The last 2 years, they haven't done the swap off, but probably in the future that will start again, because many, many items that come into the swap off are very good reusable items that have future life in another home. And it gives people a way to get this stuff distributed around, even if they don't want it themselves. There's a new compost program in Concord, and keeping food waste out of the waste stream is a pretty big priority in a more sustainable home. So the idea is to not just throw away all your food waste, but to use it in the composting waste drop-off pilot. So we would have you consider that too. Concord has a goal to reach 30% increase in waste diversion. And that's a very important consideration as we go forth. I mentioned the Concord drop off and swap off. So another reuse action focus is the household goods operation that operates out of Acton, Mass. And you can donate old furniture and couches and chairs and different household items that have a potential for future life in another home, but where you don't need them and you are trying to get rid of them rather than have them go into a landfill. And again, there's curbside recycling that most of you probably know about, where recycling gets picked up at individual homes. And there's weekly curbside pickup of cardboard, glass, and metal. At this point, I would like to pause for some discussion or questions. And we wondered if anybody has questions about the inside sustainability items that we've discussed. And take this time to pose it as a question. If you have questions, please raise your hand. I guess, Amanda, can you?
Yep, so we have Joseph up first with his hand raised.
So quick question. Earlier you talked about the weatherization incentives that are available. Do those include windows? Windows are a big area of heat loss, and I wondered whether the upgrading of windows or using window coverings, is that considered within the weatherization, or is that not really part of the program?
I can answer that if you want.
Yeah.
This is Kim Slack. I'm a heat pump coach for the town of Concord, and I also talk a lot with people about weatherization. No, windows are not part of the weatherization effort. However, I will note that there is a federal tax credit for window replacements. So if you Google federal tax credit for windows, you'll find out all the rules for how you would apply that tax credit.
And so
Thank you, Kim.
some things that are on the eligibility list would include insulation measures like in your attic, thinking about insulation for your walls. And then there are also like eligible ceiling measures. So like weather stripping and duct sealing, all the like those things would count. And you can find more information on the town's website. And if you have, I know that that's not always the best way to navigate. So you can also email me, which is akohn@concordma.gov, and I can point you in the right direction.
Thank you both.
And then next up, we have Karen, who has a question.
Unmute. I was just curious when, what are the considerations when you're trying to decide between ground source or air source heat pumps? And if you know the difference or the benefits of heat pump water heaters over solar water heaters.
All right, this is Kim Slack again. By the way, anybody who wants to get a free consultation with a coach, go to concordcleancomfort.org, and you can sign up for a meeting with someone like myself. And but let me answer your question about air source versus ground source. The main difference is cost. And let me also point out, we know there's probably 400 air source heat pumps in town, and maybe 10 ground source heat pumps. So part of the reason that there's so many air sources is because they're much less expensive than ground source. But if you have a large house with lots of land, it's worth looking into. And then the question about solar versus heat pump water heater, air source heat pump water heaters, I don't really know. I haven't really compared the two. That's a really good question.
I was just curious.
Yeah, if you have a good south-facing roof, it's definitely something to look into, and you might want to on the Concord Clean Comfort, there is actually a section on solar water heaters, so you could get some more information there.
Thank you.
And next we have Larry with his hand raised.
I had a question, Kim. Kim and I know each other. I used to work at DOER, and he took advantage of one of the programs we have there. In any case, I have a neighbor who got an air source heat pump. He replaced his oil system, and he's spending more money now. And the main reason is that he was told not to turn his heat pump, do a setback with his heat pump. When he had oil, he would turn it down at night, and so he's using a lot less energy. And I've heard a variety of things about the wisdom of setting back heat pumps, and I didn't know what your thoughts. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are, Kim, on that.
Generally, you know, when I was little, I was always taught you turn the heat down at night, and heat pumps operate differently. And so you really do need to keep them pretty close to the same temperature 24 hours a day. You can't turn them down a few degrees, but it takes a lot longer for your house to heat back up in the morning if you turn it down very much at night. So consequently, what we do is we keep our bedroom a few degrees cooler than the rest of the house, because we like to sleep with a little cooler room, and we're quite comfortable that way. Does that answer your question, Larry?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I guess the other thing I heard was that from a heat pump installer, that some of these heat pumps have an electric element that come on if it's being required to come up to temperature faster, and some heat
Yes.
pump installers actually disconnect that electric element. And then there are some heat pumps that come without the electric element. So those might be some considerations as well.
That's correct. Thank you for adding that. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that the element, if you add in resistance heating, which is what I think that is, for the augmentation of the heat system, it's expensive. The resistance electric heating is one of the most expensive forms of heating.
And Karen, looks like you have another question.
This one might be for you, Amanda. I'm just curious. I know Concord does the drop-off, swap-off twice a year. Has there ever been discussion of setting up like the reuse it, swap shop near the town, maybe at the recycling center or something like Needham has, where it's open a few hours a day? I think it's run by volunteers, and people can take things during those hours or pick things up during those hours rather than waiting and hanging on to things for half a year.
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm also aware that I've only been here for about 6 months now, maybe 7. And so I'm sure there could have been conversations prior to that. And I think it's an interesting idea. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It would be the space and figuring out where we would have room for that. But I know that there are some programs, like at the Council on Aging, they have like a little shop in there that they sell items that throughout the year, and some items that are really helpful again, since it's at the Council on Aging, for our elders that they can check out and use, and sometimes people donate things there. So there might be some options. And I know there's a few clothing bins around town, but for some of those other items, yeah, it would be an interesting thing to look into, but I'm not aware of any current conversations around it.
Just curious. Thanks.
I think during COVID, online groups like the Buy Nothing group became very popular, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where that's sort of replaced and created a continuous swap day by having groups like the Buy Nothing group.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know that the hand raising isn't maybe working for everyone. And so all the hands have been addressed. So if you have another question, just feel free to come off mute.
We're missing that chat window where you can normally type the questions. That's the thing that's missing from this, is the chat. So.
Yeah, the town does turn off the chat for all video.
Right.
It's just one of their policies.
Got it. So I guess I had another question about, we were talking about the newer heat pump systems go down to a much lower temperature. I've looked into those lately, and they tend to have a 40 or 50 or 60% premium over the others that go down to a reasonable temperature. So I think that people are tending to trade off on, I don't know if you want to call it a hybrid system, where they're maintaining their fossil fuel based systems for really cold days, but moving to heat pump systems for the 90 or 95%. I'm kind of curious, are you seeing that kind of approach happening more and more often, or are people really that are moving forward going 100% in and turning off their fossil fuel systems?
Yeah, Joseph, this is Kim Slack. I am seeing actually more people going 100% heat pump, partially because the larger incentives now. $10,000 is a pretty big incentive for you to go 100%. I am not seeing the wide, you said 40% variation in cost between cold climate. I am not seeing that wide variation. I think it's much smaller than that.
Yeah,
So-
I just got a quote for $42,000 for my 3,000 square foot home for a heat pump system. That seems, to me, very high,
Yeah,
for.
you know what? You need to see a heat pump coach, and we can talk to you about different options. And one of the things that we do is help you compare quotes. Joseph, I strongly suggest you get 3 quotes. We're
Sure.
seeing variations, sometimes up to $10,000 in different
Right.
bids for houses. So it may be that you got a high bid there. I don't know.
Yeah, we also get the Concord premium sometimes for living in Concord. So that's always a factor.
It's a free market, though. People want your business. So I think there's again, if you get more quotes, you may be able to see more variation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question that we've been asked related to whole home heating pretty frequently is, do I need to remove my system? And right now you don't have to remove it completely. So if you are really nervous about it and you want to save it for like worst case scenario, emergency situation, you actually just need to sign off that you will not use it except for that situation. And I think that's been comforting to some people to know that that backup is there and to get used to what that system looks like.
The key is to get your heat pump sized correctly, and so you need to ask the installers to do a heat load calculation of your house, and that can also give you lots of reassurance.
Well, are there any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for entertaining the ones that have been. So let's move on. And we're now in the section of the presentation and workshop to discuss the outside parts of our home and sustainable measures that can be taken to address that. And there's a new poll. So please go through this poll and identify of the outside issues that were here, which ones you have the highest interest in. There's sustainable landscaping, there's water conservation, there's electric vehicles, there's solar panels, and there's battery energy storage.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll here and share the results.
So it looks like there's quite a bit of interest in the sustainable landscaping. And there's quite a bit of interest in this battery energy storage. And then a lot of people have suggested that electric vehicles are of importance. as a third option. Do you want to speak to this, Jerry, at all?
Jerry, you're on mute.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, I think the two big takeaways here is that from this group, sustainable landscaping and battery energy storage seem to be the two biggest topics, or I shouldn't say biggest, but the two topics of most interest. So I can take over from here. I'll just mention we don't have a lot of information on battery storage in this presentation, but I can talk to that at the end of it for those who have the strong interest there. But we do have plenty of information on the sustainable landscaping. So Doug, why don't you advance the slide and I'll get going here. So much like reducing energy consumption inside your home, there's a lot of things we can do outside our home to enhance our sustainability. This includes actions focused on the lawn itself, such as establishing a pollinator garden or planting native species. And then there's also the mechanical things, such as replacing your gas-powered lawn equipment with electric options. Let's look into these items in some more detail now. So I think it's important to start with the recognition that sustainable landscaping is a win-win situation. It's good for us individually in our lawns and gardens. It's good for our community. It's good for our natural resources. There's lots of things that are positive about it, which are kind of listed here. Landscaping sustainably increases biodiversity, reduces demand on our water supply, at the same time improving water quality and mitigating flash flooding, increases resiliency to drought. And with all this, it takes less energy to support and maintain a sustainable lawn and garden. And if your lawn and garden are growing well, it sequesters carbon. Granted, those are small amounts, but again, we're looking to push a metaphor here, and we need a number of minor streams to produce a major river of emissions reduction and to increase sustainability. So let's look at some of these in more detail now. Next slide, please. So invasive plants are a big issue all around us. Many of us may not know that some of these plants are invasives. I did not know that burning bush, shown on the lower right, was an invasive until just a few weeks ago. Purple loosestrife, I've been familiar with for a long time, and I have mixed feelings about it because in the late summer, the areas around our rivers become clogged with these gorgeous, beautiful purple plants. And it's very scenic, but it pushes out the native biodiversity in that area because our local plants and animals are not accustomed to dealing with purple loosestrife. So it's important to remove these invasive species whenever we can. As I just mentioned, it's a leading cause of native biodiversity loss. And if they run amok, they can alter your property value and utility operations. And there's lots of examples of these sort of things. Bittersweet is a nasty plant to get rid of, and it can take over parts of your land and forests and make it, frankly, impossible to get into without cutting it out. But it's not the only one. There's garlic mustard, there's glossy buckthorn, and there's a bunch more. And so the idea here is, first, let's get rid of these things wherever we can. And in their place, let's plant some native species. The native species help the biodiversity, and they provide food and shelter for both the wildlife and insects that are important and required elements of our entire ecosystem. And just sort of more operationally, native species take less care. They've evolved to take care of themselves, so to speak, in this particular New England environment. And as such, they don't need as much watering and they don't need fertilization as much. Fortunate for us, our Department of Natural Resources has a great brochure on this. The link is shown there. It's a native plant brochure. For those of you who are interested in planting native plants and gardening more sustainably, please check that out. Next slide, Doug. Gardening sustainably has, to garden sustainably, there are other things you can do. Pollinator gardens are very important. They're especially in a semi-rural community such as ours, where we have a lot of farms that require pollinators for their crops to grow. And so there's been an attack on the pollinator species in recent years due to a lot of herbicides that are being used. So the pollinators need our gardens and our flowers more than ever. And besides planting pollinator-friendly plants, it's best, if possible, to avoid pesticides and herbicides. Doing so helps keep your lawn and garden safe for your children and pets and reduces runoff into ponds and streams. And when those circumstances arise where you must get rid of a pest such as termites or related destructive beasts, use as little of a pesticide as you possibly can to minimize any adverse effects. You can reduce stress on our water system by collecting rainwater with rain barrels and using those, the rain collected that way, to water your lawn and garden. And as I mentioned a little earlier, or Doug mentioned, I think, you can replace your gasoline-powered lawnmowers, leaf blowers, and trimmers with new electric models. These reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the lawn equipment. And not only that, I've found that they're easier to use, they're quieter, they don't generate, the noxious fumes. And I much prefer using the electric versions over the gasoline versions. And that's all in addition to the greenhouse gas savings. Next slide, please. Using water sustainably is a big portion of increasing overall sustainability. It's come up already a couple times in discussions here. But the first thing to point out is, much like with home energy assessments, you can also get a free water assessment. This is provided by Concord Public Works, and this will look for and help identify any leaks or wasteful uses of water. So that's a great first place to start. But you can conserve your water both outside and inside your home. Outside your home, we already talked about using rain barrels to collect rainwater. And if you use rain gauges, you can more accurately determine just how much watering your lawn needs, and thereby avoid overwatering and using more water than you really need, which is important when we, especially towards the end of summer, when we often get on these watering restrictions. But you can also conserve your water inside your home, almost invisibly, through the use of low-flow toilets and efficient low-flow shower heads. So in doing this and in watching your water consumption and minimizing it, this conservation will save water and money. Your water bills will go down. Next slide. So let's talk about electric vehicles. Electric vehicles cut emissions and they save money too. So let's look at how that happens. So first of all, well, I don't know if it's first, but money comes first for many. It's important to point out electric vehicles save money. On an operational basis, mileage costs are cut by 44% for here in Concord. Basically, if you have a car that gets 40 miles per gallon on gasoline, it'll cost you $10 to drive 100 miles. If you drive that same 100 miles on electricity from CMLP, that costs $5.60. So in this example, which is not hypothetical, this is my actual case with my Chevy Volt. My cost to drive a mile with my Chevy Volt as opposed to a gasoline car cuts cost by 44%. Now, the picture is even better with saving emissions. Emitted carbon in Concord is reduced by 91%. And this is because our electric supply is so clean. I mentioned earlier at the very top that CMLP is doing a great job in cutting the emissions from the energy portfolio. It's right now, it's 83% clean. So that 83% clean means is the key piece of how we get to this 91% reduction in emitted carbon. The other 8% difference there is because the electric vehicles are just fundamentally more efficient. But once CMLP gets to 100% clean energy, then the electric vehicle emissions will be reduced to zero. And that meaning you will have reduced your carbon for transportation by 100%. So EVs are a big deal. They save money and they save on emissions. Next slide, please. Now, in addition to all that goodness, there's also fun involved here. EVs are just fun to drive. They're smooth, they're quiet, and they have good to almost unbelievable acceleration. The Tesla Model S is extraordinary. It's not even the fastest. It accelerates from 0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds. Other cars are in the 3 to 4 second range. And even when they're not in that range, they're still fun. But these are a blast to drive. And there's a wide variety available now. Here's just a few examples. The Chevy Bolt is on the lower left, the Tesla Model 3 in the center. On the right, two interesting Ford vehicles. There's the Mustang Mach-E, which I haven't driven it, but I understand to be very sporty. And then there's the Ford pickup, the F-150 Lightning, that I think is getting a lot of attention because it can do so many different things with its embedded battery. Next slide, please. So in addition to saving money with EVs and saving emissions and having fun, there are many rebates and tax credits available. This whole situation is a little complicated, particularly in terms of which vehicles get the $7,500 tax credit. But your dealers will know all of this off the top of their head. But the point here is that much like with heat pumps, there are substantial tax credits and rebates available when you buy or lease an electric vehicle. Next slide, please. So with the last slide on electric vehicles, the EVs are consumers of energy. You can also generate your own energy by putting solar panels on your house, sometimes known as solar photovoltaics or solar PV. Let's look into a little more detail on this. So kind of the bottom line with the solar panels is that they'll reduce your electric bill. And they can do that very substantially, depending on how big your home is, what kind of exposure you have. Your mileage may vary, so to speak. But I'm sure if you talk to anybody who's put these up on their roof, they'll tell you how delighted they are at their recent electric bills. In addition, it's kind of fun to contemplate. If you have solar panels and you have an electric vehicle, in effect, you're powering your car with sunlight. The sunlight that hits your solar panels is converted to electric energy, and that electric energy is used to charge the battery in your EV, and you're off and rolling. And it costs you zero in marginal costs and zero in terms of emissions. Additionally, photovoltaics can make your home more resilient to power outages. We're fortunate here in Concord that we suffer very few power outages, but every once in a while the power does go off. And if you have a solar installation on your roof, you can generate your own energy. And that way, if you have any critical functions in your house, any medical equipment or your freezer, you can keep that going through the outage. And having solar increases your home value because a prospective buyer, never mind if they're interested in sustainability or not, a prospective buyer will look at that and realize that their operational costs will be less than it would be if there were no panels there, because they're not paying nearly as much for electricity. Not to mention the fact that generally speaking, electricity costs continue to rise. So as those costs rise, your savings rise with PV. There are different financing options for installing solar panels. In short, there's the option where you pay for it all up front and it's yours and you get all the energy from it. There are also $0 upfront financing options in which effectively a solar company will own the panels and you lease them the area on your roof, and in return you get payments from them for the energy generated off of your roof. Fortunately, for those of us looking at solar, CMLP has a step-by-step guide for going solar on their website. And we'll show you a whole bunch of links for all this information at the very end. There are rebates available here too. The most significant one is a federal tax credit, not a tax deduction, but a tax credit. This year, 26% of the installed cost for both labor and materials, you can get a tax credit for that. That rate drops in 2023 to 22%, unless Congress does something to extend the 26% rate. But right now, as everything sits, you can get a tax credit of 26% this year and 22% next year. Or I should say, or, it's not an and. There are also state tax credits available here, but not for Concord residents. It has to do with the fact that we have our own light plant, but our light plant does provide a rebate, and that is $625 per installed kilowatt with a max rebate of $3,100. But in addition to all this, during those periods when you generate more energy than you need or than you're using, you can sell this back to CMLP. This is known as net metering. Next slide, please. So at this point, we've gone through a number of different actions that you can take to make your home and your garden more sustainable. So we've selected here our top 10 that we'll go over. So number 10 is to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Concord makes this very easy with curbside pickup and the drop off and the swap off. And so there's no reason not to be doing this. And I think most everyone is. I would just say, keep this in mind every time you're throwing something away. How can we avoid throwing it away? Is there some way to reuse it? Can I buy something different that doesn't have this much packaging, et cetera? Or is there somewhere I can recycle it? Number 9, plant a pollinator garden. Let's help those butterflies and bees that help produce this wonderful fruit and vegetables that we love from our local farms. Inside your home, replace your gas-fired stove with an induction stove. Many people, once they've gotten accustomed to it, love this, particularly better than electric stoves. And as Doug noted earlier, it helps clean up the air in your house. Now, this one I think everyone knows, because from the opening poll, I think everyone had replaced their incandescent bulbs with LEDs. So I'd say that's great. Glad you've done it. Now let's do another action on this list. Trade in your gas-powered car for a cost-saving electric vehicle. You just saw that there are lots of advantages to getting an EV. and I can guarantee you'll have fun driving it. Add solar panels to your home and generate your own energy. And then you can use that to power your car and drive on sunlight. Make plans to reduce your appliances when they fail with Energy Star appliances. Don't wait for them to fail. Do a little bit of research beforehand, and pay close attention to Energy Star. That way, when one of your appliances, whether it's a stove or a hot water heater or a washing machine, you're ready to go and you won't have to make a decision under duress. Weatherize your home. The better your home is weatherized, the more comfortable it'll be and the less energy you'll use. And the number 2 item to do, much like number 4, make plans to replace your heating system for when it fails. Be ready to replace it with heat pumps. As you know, fortunately, we have these coaches in town, as you can already see, yep, you know, Kim is a great resource here. So I'm sure he would tell you, don't come to him in panic. Come to him early on and do some planning. And the number 1 way to take action is get a home energy audit and identify various ways you can make your home more energy efficient. This too will make your home more comfortable, you'll save emissions, and you'll save money. So I've got several slides on resources. I'm not going to go over these, but I just want you to know that there's all these links for audits and coaching resources. By the way, you don't need to copy this down. You can download this file with all this information from the Cooler Concord registration site. So all of that's there. And you can have all the links available to you right there. No need to write these down. Next slide. So there's some wonderful sustainable landscaping resources. I mentioned one of them earlier. It's that top one, Native Plants for Sustainable Landscaping. Then there's a big handbook on sustainable landscaping here in Concord. It's got lots of details about how to actually do some of the plantings. So I'd encourage you to check out these resources. Next slide. And then I think you hopefully got the message. There's lots of rebates available. In fact, it's a fairly complicated environment with all these rebates. But using these links, it will be easy for you to get the information you need because you can see, you know, the specific links for different areas. So I mentioned just a moment ago, you can download this material. Just basically go to the URL right there. You could even go to the top level, www.coolerconcord.org, and search for, you know, hit the events button, and you'll find this material. But these will take you directly there. And finally, I want to thank all of you for coming, but more specifically for expressing your interest in taking action to combat climate change and improve our sustainability here. And so I'll close with one statement. I'm not exactly sure who the source of this was, but I think the concept is pretty clear. The best time to act was yesterday. The next best time is today. So let's all take some actions today. Thank you very much. So now we have some more time for more Q&A if anyone has any more questions. It was nice to hear earlier during the Q&A session that there were lots of very good questions there and some good conversation both ways. So Karen, I see you have your hand raised.
I have a question about solar and the net metering program and the SREX program, and if you can enroll in both or if it's an either or thing.
So they're separate. You can enroll in both. So they the SREC is, I believe, associated with the installation rebates, whereas the net metering is really, an ongoing operational thing. It's, just every month, if you fed energy back into CMLP, they will credit you. Now, I will say, to be fair and fully transparent about it, they rebate you. I shouldn't say rebate. They pay you the wholesale rate for electricity, not the retail rate. So as consumers, we're paying, in round numbers, 20 cents a kilowatt hour from CMLP, all in. That includes distribution and transmission. CMLP only pays the wholesale rate, and that does not include either transmission or distribution, and is much lower. I think it's around 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So to be fair, you won't get rich off of this, but you will get some compensation. Good question.
Thank you.
Jerry, my understanding about the solar is that you would get 100% of your excess in the month that you are generating it, up to the amount that you use.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, over the amount that you're consuming with the electricity, then you're getting the wholesale rate, as you say. But my understanding is that if you are feeding energy back off the grid during the daytime and you're using some of that at night, you are getting 100% of that benefit that you just gave away during the daytime back at night. So you aren't having to buy it at that 20 cents an hour.
Yeah, that's correct. So there's a kind of, if you think of the cost curve, there's kind of two regimes. The first regime is you can use the solar to offset 100% everything you're consuming. And then beyond that, if you have generated some extra, it's just that little bit extra that you sell back to CMLP at the wholesale rate.
I know that Joseph, you have had the experience with this to some extent. Maybe you have some comments.
Yeah, I mean, Concord has a unique program, which with the monthly net metering. So, for example, I'm in a situation where I generate more than I use on an annual basis by several thousand kilowatt hours, but because of net metering, I don't generate as much in the winter, so I pay a lot in the winter, but in the summer I overproduce, but then the amount that I'm reimbursed for my excess is, as you said, 4 cents. It used to be a cent. It's gone up obviously in recent months. So yeah, it's a unique program. I've been on the program since 2011, so this is my 11th year, and it's been a great program. Obviously, we've moved to using multiple electric vehicles now, so now we're consuming a lot more than we were when we did the initial baseline 11 years ago. And that's another thing to really keep in mind is, as you think about this increased electrification, whether it's from air source or ground source heat pumps or heat pump water heaters, these are going to increase your demand for electricity. And so it's really important, especially if you can do renewable energy, whether it's solar PV or wind or whatever you can do, is to really holistically look at those numbers and do the math to figure out what you need to be able to generate.
Those are great comments. And I think you're on point with every single one of them. Of course, it makes sense. You've got this running for more than 10 years. And in fact, I'm sure at this point, you've you've paid off your initial investment there for sure. So, you know, you're saving money every day that you're not, that you're
Yeah,
generating. your energy.
my original goal was to drive to net zero, but you know, 11 years ago when we started the journey, the solar PV part was in place, but the heat pump part was not in place at that point, right? Because we moved to Concord from Asia where heat pumps are predominant, and we only used heat pumps for 20 years. So when we came here, we couldn't really use them because they weren't cost effective and they didn't work in cold climates. But here we are 10 years ago, it would be a different decision if I was installing today, right? So I think anybody who's looking at it today should really go down this path. At least I would if I was making that decision today.
Yeah, I also want to amplify something you said that I think is important to acknowledge. You were looking at trying to drive to net zero. I'm looking to do the same thing. And what I is one of my first steps I started several years ago is I look at my total energy footprint.
Right.
And, you know, on a monthly basis, how much am I consuming in gasoline? How much am I consuming on heating oil? I hate to say that, but we still have that. How much of my electricity am I consuming? And so the good news is I can see that we're trending down. Still a ways to go to net zero, but this helps me focus on what's left. You know, what are the next pieces that I can, or next things I can do to continue to drive that curve down. And so I think it's a great goal to have, a great visualization of this is where you're headed. This is where I want to go. And, you know, to do that, we need to take a series of actions.
Yeah.
Of course, getting started, you know, you want to take some action, but as you do this and you take one after the other, 1 foot after the other, as the Chinese proverb goes, you'll go a million miles.
Yeah, when we first came to Concord and we baselined the first year, we spent about, I'll call it in round numbers, $6,000 in energy. And, you know, we're down under 1,500 now. We're not to net zero, but, you know, we've made a significant dent in that. And, you know, we trying to figure out what that next dent is to get down to net zero.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I just want to make a correction, Jerry, something you said.
Oh,
Solar
yes.
panels, if the power to the area goes down, your solar panels do not work. And the reason for that is they can't have any electricity going into the lines, because the workers need to have no power in the lines. So
right.
if you concerned about losing power, you have to have either a battery or a generator.
Right.
Yeah, there's a cutoff switch that's required there. And I apologize for misspeaking. I was thinking of the situation when you have a battery associated with that. So we've got another question here. Larry, you have your hand up?
In terms of the light plant getting to net zero, have they done a study if the entire town went to electric vehicles and heat pumps? That's going to certainly increase the load for the town. So that's, and it probably will require quite a bit more power to satisfy all those needs. Has that study been done yet, or are they working on it?
So as I understand it, I don't know if there's been a study or if they're actively working on it, but I do know that they are concerned about it. They are aware that particularly on distribution issues, that there could be some changes needed. And it's a topic I've been wanting to discuss with them in more detail, but I haven't gotten to it yet. It was brought to my mind in a very concrete way. So I live on a cul-de-sac here in Concord, and I have an EV, and recently 2 neighbors got EVs. And it got me thinking, you know, how many EVs can one transformer support? And I don't have that answer, except to say, can support 3. We haven't seen any problems yet.
Yeah.
And I did ask Dave Wood, who's the director at CMLP, if they were aware of this, and he goes, "Oh yes, yes we are." I think he said they have looked into it, but I don't know the extent of it. But for sure, I got to believe, just as you described, it's not just the EVs, it's the heat pumps too. You know, we are increasing our load on our utility, but I do have to say they're well run. You know, they're doing a great job. I have confidence that they'll be on top of this, but I don't have any more details than that to share.
When I've looked at some of the graphs that show the energy reductions that have happened in the last, since 2018 and 19 in Concord, that those are being offset by increased driving in EVs now. So although there's a decreasing amount of energy being used for certain things, there's an increase that's starting to happen with the use of heat pumps and EVs.
Our grid operator, ISO New England, has projected that heat pumps will grow 15% per year. CMLP is aware of those projections. The grid operator is also aware of that they have to increase capacity. So people are on this question, and I think what is the unknown here is how fast is the adoption rate for heat pumps and EVs. And so their projections, and it looks like the grid operator is designing systems that will help us meet that future.
This is perhaps a good moment for me to mention a little bit about batteries. We didn't have any slides on batteries because right now there is no program in town for it. That is, the CMLP has no support for batteries. There are no financial incentives. They're not sure how they're going to use them just yet. So we decided that this is maybe a topic that wasn't needed tonight. However, I think, as I recall from the polls, everybody had this as a strong interest. So let me comment a little about this. First of all, there is recognition at CMLP that we need batteries here in town. We have a problem already. Actually, I think we've had it for several years with the solar production in the springtime. There are periods in spring, like right about now. Actually, we may have had one over the last few days, now to think about it, where solar production is at its maximum. The sun is shining brightly. The trees have not leafed out. More of the sun is hitting the solar panels that we do have. And so solar production is at a maximum. At the same time, energy consumption tends to be toward a minimum, especially during school vacation week. A lot of people go out of town. But also during this period, except for last weekend, which was strange, temperatures are mild. So heating systems aren't used and air conditioning isn't used. So the loads are very low. And that produces a problem for CMLP, because while as individuals, we might be able to sell our overproduction back to CMLP, CMLP cannot do that back to ISO New England. It's not a regulatory thing, it's an electrical thing. The substations that sit between the transmission lines and the local distribution are not set up for current to go the other way. So CMLP has to avoid this. It's a failure condition if we try to send energy or electricity back the other way. So for this reason, CMLP is limiting the solar installations right now on large properties and industrial and commercial entities. Residences are still, I don't know if I'd say encouraged, but residences are still it's okay to get solar there. CMLP is looking at battery storage. They still have a ways to go on this. There are multiple ways to deploy solar, both in terms of electrically, how you connect it into your system, as well as operationally, how do you manage it? Batteries can actually pay for themselves in certain situations. So it's not necessarily a financial burden for the town, but there are financial considerations on this. So batteries are in CMLP's plans, but it's probably be a couple years before we see any actual installations. Amanda, I don't know if you have any more detailed info on that than I just recounted.
Well, I know that they are in negotiations on some contracts, and the people that they're talking with have batteries in hand. And so depending on how those negotiations and contracting goes and the installation, could it be a year? Could it be 3 years? Negotiations can be a tricky thing to figure out. So I can't place a timeline on it, but I know that there are several things in the pipeline. And I know that there are about 9 homes in town that have their own battery backups. And so it's not unheard of that, that people, it's rare, but it's not unheard of. So there are people in town that do have that.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can install your own battery now. You can use it for backup, just the way Amanda was describing. There are no rebates for it. And the battery, if you're using it for backup only, you're not taking full advantage of the advantages a battery can supply. To do that, you need some assistance with programs from CMLP, or I should say from your provider. And so there's two big classes of batteries to differentiate between. One is the utility scale, and the other is the residential or individual distributed. And so I believe CMLP is right now looking at utility scale storage primarily. Might be nice to have both available in town, but I think we still need to wait and see what comes out of CMLP. Okay, any other questions on any topics that we've covered, or even topics we haven't covered? Okay. Well, I guess since there are no more questions, I want to thank everyone for coming, for participating in the discussions. I think the discussions and commentary have added a lot to this. I appreciate that level of participation. Kim, I want to thank you particularly for coming and giving us lots of information, detailed information about heat pumps. And before we finish, I want to put in a plug for our last sustainability event. It's on June 4th, which is a Saturday at Harvey Wheeler. That's where we're having an EV open house where you can come and see late model EVs, talk with their owners, also talk with EV specialists here in town who can inform you and educate you on charging strategies and driving long distances and different plug types and whatever kind of questions you might have. So that's a great event to look forward to. But finally, just thanks for coming. Be sure to go forward and take action, and let's all live sustainably here. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
bye.